liftoff from Falcon 9.
Good afternoon from SpaceX headquarters here in Hawthorne, California. You're looking at a live view of the Falcon 9 Block 5 at Cape Canaveral, Florida, Launchpad SC40. Today's mission is going to be a very historical one. We got over 4 milestones that are going to be crossed off during today's mission. The first of which is that if you take a look at that first stage booster, you may notice that it is a little city. That is because it is flying for its fourth time, an important first in SpaceX's mission towards launch vehicle reliability and reusability. The second milestone being crossed off during today's mission is that this mission will be lifting the heaviest payload that a Falcon 9 has ever lifted in SpaceX history. The third milestone that is being crossed off during today's mission is that this mission will be the very first mission in which payload fairings are going to be reflown. These payload fairings, although they may look like any ordinary payload fairings, were actually reflown from the Arabsat 6A mission, which launched earlier this year. The fourth and final milestone being crossed off on today's launch is that this mission marks the very first time in history in which a launch provider has designed, produced, and manufactured their very own satellite buses, and now hopefully will launch them on their very own launch vehicle. That being said, we got a lot of exciting stuff going on for today's launch. The range is currently clear, and the weather is go. All systems are looking good for launch, and we are very excited for today's mission. That being said, let's take a look at what Starlink is. Alright, for those of you just joining us, we are currently about T-minus 11 minutes and 17 seconds away from launch. As I said earlier, all systems are looking go for launch, and the weather couldn't be any better. It's a beautiful afternoon here, or actually out at Cape Canaveral, Florida, and the teams at SpaceX in Hawthorne and in the Launch Control Center, or LCC, in Florida, are both very excited for today's mission. In addition to reusing payload fairings, I also mentioned that the first stage booster is being reflown for a fourth time. We're going to be attempting a landing zone landing here at Cape Canaveral, which hopefully we will have a successful touchdown, marking the very first time a booster has flown and launched and landed for the 4th time. With about currently T-minus 10 minutes and 30 seconds on the clock. Some of the advantages to Starlink is that Starlink is going to be deployed into a very low orbit of about 550 by 550 kilometers. The proximity towards the ground that these satellites have is much more advantageous than normal geostationary satellites. This gives us a faster transmission time between ground stations and the satellites, therefore higher speed Wi-Fi than normal telecom internet providers. We're currently about T-minus 9 minutes and 30 seconds away from launch. Again, all systems are looking great, and the weather is go. So let's talk a little bit about our mission timeline. After launch, we are going to have something called Max Q. After Max Q, that's going to be followed up by MECO, or main engine cutoff. Following this, very quickly, we'll have stage separation followed by SES1, or second engine start number 1. The second stage will ignite its engine and burn for a good amount of time, and then it'll cut off its engine for SECO number 1. We're going to have 2 ignition events on today's mission on the second stage. After SECO 1, we're expecting to see a landing at LZ1 of the booster B10, I believe it is 48.4. Yeah, so everything is looking good for launch, and we're going to be coasting as well. So after we have the touchdown of the first stage booster, we will pause live commentary and coast for anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes until we reignite that second stage engine for a very short SES2, or second engine start number 2, followed by a second engine cutoff number 2, or SECO 2. Following this, we will coast again for about 10 minutes, and then after that we will deploy 60 Starlink satellites for the very first time to begin official operations for testing and various other purposes. With about T-minus 6 minutes and 43 seconds on the clock, let's wait for launch. Just under 5 minutes and 30 seconds away from launch. Just under about T-minus 4 minutes and 3 seconds away from liftoff. With just under T-minus 2 minutes and 20 seconds away from launch, things are looking great for launch. The launch director has given the final go for launch on the countdown net, and the mission managers as well as the operational safety manager has also verified go. Range has also been verified once again is go, so the airspace is clear, and the weather is also looking good, so the upper level winds are within our launch parameters. Currently T-minus 1 minute and 50 seconds away from launch. At this time, Falcon 9 is in startup. This means that the Falcon 9's internal flight computers are now turning on. So at this point, there is no human intervention going on the rocket. It will all be autonomous flying. Also, the Falcon 9 has what is called an autonomous flight termination system. This is very different from any normal rocket, as the AFTS allows for the Falcon 9 to fly in trajectories that go over residential areas without having the need for a human to perform the flight termination system function in the case that something goes wrong. With just under T-minus 1 minute and 15 seconds away from launch, let's listen in and sit back for launch. Minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, ignition, 2, 1, and liftoff of the Falcon 9. And as you just saw there, we just had liftoff of the Falcon 9. Currently, the Falcon 9 is pitching downrange. It is also heading on a 37-degree launch azimuth, that is to get us into our 50-degree inclination of our orbits. Currently, telemetry on the Falcon 9 first stage is looking good. We're looking beautiful on the trajectory, and the engine performance of all 9 Merlin engines is looking at nominal performance. The next events that will be coming up in a few minutes will be MECO, or main engine cutoff, followed by stage separation, SES1, and payload fairing deployment. We'll also get to see live views from stage 1 as it heads back to Cape Canaveral, Florida, for a hopeful touchdown here in Cape Canaveral, Florida. As of this time, Falcon 9 continues to follow a nominal trajectory. The performance on all 9mm engines is looking good. The power and telemetry is also looking good. So far everything is good, and if you're just joining us here, we just had a beautiful liftoff from Cape Canaveral, Florida, of the Falcon 9 Block 5, lifting 60 Starlink satellites, the heaviest payload that any Falcon 9 has ever flown so far into space. Currently, the Falcon 9 is passing through 18,000 meters and increasing with the first stage at full throttle. And yeah, so next upcoming events in a few minutes should be MECO, stage separation, and SES-1. So let's stand by. Let's stand by to see those. Alright, so we are just about 10 seconds away to see Miko of that first stage. And there we go, we just had Miko. Now standing by to see stage separation. And telemetry does show stage separation. And there we go, we have just had SES-1. And so currently you can see a live view from the first stage on the left hand side of your screen and the second stage. At this time, both stages are following nominal trajectories. Stage 2 on the right hand side of your screen is continuing towards orbit, while stage 1 on the left hand side of your screen is continuing towards, or is actually flipping around and heading back towards Cape Canaveral, Florida. So at this time, it will be performing a boost back burn, followed by a cutoff of that boost back burn, and then it'll coast before we will see that entry burn start up. And so as of this time, both Stage 1 and Stage 2 are following nominal trajectories. Stage 1 continues on its trip back to Cape Canaveral, Florida. Yeah, so you can see the telemetry for both Stage 1 and Stage 2. As you can tell, Stage 2 is, burning downrange, and Stage 1 is heading back. And yeah, so let's just stand by and watch as the mission continues on. Coming up here very shortly, we're going to have payload fairing separation, in which those two payload fairings on the second stage being reflown from the Arabsat 6A mission will separate from the second stage. So let's stand by and look for payload fairing deployment. And there you go. You can see payload fairing deployment. And you can see those 60 Starlink satellites stacked one on top of one another on top of that second stage. And we just had SECO as well on that second stage engine. So that just wraps up the mission for the second stage. So with that being said, we are now going to move on to basically watching the first stage as the first stage comes down towards landing zone 1. So stage 2 currently is now coasting. Stage 1 is heading back to Cape Canaveral, Florida. And looking at the beautiful view from the first stage, you can actually see Cape Canaveral, or the launch pad, coming into sight. If we get that live camera feed back, and because we can't always get to the stable feed from the Falcon 9 as it is passing through the atmosphere, and the radio signals can't really maintain. So if we can get that feedback up, you can see a beautiful view of Cape Canaveral, and there we go. So that being said, we are standing by to see landing of that Falcon 9 first stage booster, hopefully at LZ1, marking the very first time a Falcon 9 has flown for the 4th time. Stage 2 is currently in a 14.8 minute coast phase, and if you're wondering how I know that, if you look at the live telemetry data from Stage 2, and if you look to your left, you'll see something that says Map View, and then underneath that you'll see Arrival Time, and then the amount of time we have till the coast phase is over. So that is the amount of time we have till the coast phase ends, if you are wondering. And yeah, so we're just standing by to see landing of that first stage booster. Cape Canaveral coming into sight as that first stage booster comes closer to the Earth. Quite a beautiful view from stage 1. Alright, looks like we had a brief firing of those Merlin engines on the first stage, but I believe that we're still standing by to see that stage 1 come in for landing, so let's listen in and watch. And you can see that landing burn has started, and so stage 1 is now coming down towards the landing zone, and so let's keep an eye out and let's hopefully see that landing. First time in SpaceX history. As the first stage comes down, you might notice that it is alternating between its 3 and 1, or it's alternating between 3 and 1 engines. It's alternating between 3 engines and its sensor engine, as it is using the different thrust variations between the 2 engines to slow it down to a gentle landing at LZ1. Alright, so let's see if we can get a live view of that landing. And there you go, you can see that stage 1 has landed at LZ1 in Cape Canaveral, Florida. This is an important milestone in SpaceX's mission to launch vehicle reusability as well as reliability. First time in SpaceX history that a booster has been landed for the 4th time. Great job to the SpaceX teams. We're glad that this happened and it's awesome as more exciting things keep on happening during today's mission. So that just about wraps up the very first part of today's mission. Switching back to the second stage is in a 14.5 minute coast phase. So with the first part of our mission done, with the launch, Max Q, MECO, a beautiful stage separation, a beautiful second engine cutoff, and now a beautiful landing, that wraps up the very first part of today's mission. So great job to the recovery teams, and so we are going to be pausing live commentary here. We're going to be back in about 14.5 minutes, and in the meantime, stage 2 will be coasting, and you can see when we will be back by looking at the telemetry on your screen of stage 2, but looking at the arrival time towards SES2. So, thank you for tuning into the first part, and we'll see you in about 14.5 minutes. Alright, welcome back. We are about 1.6 minutes away from watching SES2 and SIGO2. After this, we will be coasting for 10 minutes before deploying 60 Starlink satellites. So with 1.5 minutes away from SES2, let's sit back and watch that MVAC engine reignite. Just about 87 seconds away from SES2. After SES2, we'll have second engine cutoff number 2. And so with about 66 seconds before SES2, let's just quickly summarize what's happened so far in this mission, in case you're just joining us. We've had a beautiful launch, a beautiful stage separation, and a spectacular landing at landing zone 1 in Cape Canaveral. So, we are just about 60 seconds away, or 1 minute away from watching second engine start number 2. Just about 40 seconds to go. SES2 will be a 9-second burn, which will raise our perigee to about 500 kilometers and put us into a 53-degree inclination orbit. So with just about 30 seconds away from SES2, everything's looking good. All 60 Starlink satellites are looking good and are ready for the reignition of the second stage. We've been tracking this second stage for a very good amount of time. It's been a long mission, and everybody here at SpaceX is excited as we've crossed off so many milestones today, from the first fourth reflight of a booster, to the first reflight of fairings, to now launching the heaviest payload any Falcon 9 has ever lifted. So let's sit back and wait for that Merlin engine to reignite. We've had ignition. Standing by for shutdown. It appears that there may have been some sort of anomaly with the SES-2 standby. The teams are currently reviewing the flight data. However, the spacecraft still is in a recoverable orbit, meaning that we can still deploy the Starlink satellites, and they can use their own onboard propulsion to correct the orbital anomaly. Reviewing the data, the flight teams have confirmed that we are in a nominal orbit in terms of our inclination. Our apogee is a little bit too high, but the Starlink satellites can easily correct that with their onboard propulsion system. Our perigee is also looking good, so with that being said, we are in a semi-nominal orbit. As of this time, the flight teams have reviewed all flight data, and we are still go for payload deployment. The anomaly that caused the anomaly which threw our apogee off is still being investigated as of this time. However, our perigee is within orbital parameters. Our perigee is 547 kilometers, and our apogee is 700 kilometers. The onboard propulsion systems on all of the Starlink satellites can perform a retrograde burn to decrease the apogee. So everything is still looking good in terms of the capabilities and the orbits of the satellites, as over the next few days the spacecraft will perform an orbital correction maneuver. That being said, we are still go for payload deployment. We are now going to be coasting for 10 minutes for deploying the Starlink satellites. It's been a long mission, and the SpaceX teams will be sure to review all flight data so we can improve and make sure that this does not happen again. Alright, so welcome back. So we are just about 2 minutes away from watching payload deployment of all 60 of those Starlink satellites. Although we didn't end up in the intended orbit that we wanted to get into, the Starlink satellites were designed for this exact scenarios. They have onboard propulsion systems that were used for two purposes. First of all, orbital correction burns, which are going to be critical in this case, and also debris avoidance maneuvers. You might notice on your screen that the Falcon 9 has performed, or is actually yawing in a 360-degree circle. This is because the Starlink satellites are stacked one on top of one another. And so, when we deploy them, we are going to basically release each one, and so they're going to be coming off like a deck of cards, just sliding off one by one. You might see them bump into each other, but the Starlink satellites were designed for this exact scenario in mind, so don't worry if you see that on the live view. Alright, so we're now just about to watch that deployment of all of those Starlink satellites. Command attention rods have been released. That's been confirmed by the ground teams. And you can see those Starlink satellites starting to come off. And you can see them starting to float away from the second stage. The signal from the second stage right now is a little bit not very good, so the signal might cut out a few times or maybe freeze, but you can see those Starlink satellites starting to spread out. It kind of looks like a chaotic mess, but that is kind of like how they're designed to come off. They are built to be pretty sturdy, so they can bump into one another. That's not a problem. And so you can see all 60 of those Starlink satellites just floating away into the darkness of space. So that just about wraps up all of today's milestones on our mission. The Starlink satellites' trajectories will be watched pretty closely, and we'll make sure that each Starlink satellite enters into their correct orbit, and if not, they will naturally deorbit within a time span of about 1 to 5 years. That being said, we would like to thank the FCC, the FAA, as well as the 45th Space Wing for helping us ensure that everything that we needed for this mission was met, and the licenses we needed to launch these Starlink satellites were received. So, be sure to stay tuned to our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and on YouTube for more updates on mission milestones in the future. I would like to thank, or we would also like to thank, most importantly, you, the viewer, for tuning in and watching today's mission. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, have a good day.